Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Henry Madoff, the founding chair of the MA Curatorial Practice program at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, a two-year master's program for every aspect of professional curating. And each week, I host the Curatorial Roundtable, where I invite a distinguished curator or director of an institution to come and talk about their practice. And today, I'm happy to have Lorenzo Balbi with us. And I'm going to read a short bio for Lorenzo, as usual, mispronouncing all the foreign names. And then Lorenzo will speak for about 50 minutes, 50 minutes, at which point at the bottom of your screen is the Q&A link, and you can type a question for Lorenzo into that link at the bottom. I'll read the questions out loud, and that will be the roundtable today. So brief bio. So Lorenzo has been the artistic director of MAMbo, the Museum of Modern Art in Bologna, since 2017, when he took on the role of head of the modern and contemporary art area of the Istituzione Bologna Musei, which includes many museums. After his studies at the Conservation of Cultural Heritage at the Ca Foscari University in Venice, he earned an MA in Contemporary Art at the University of Turin. For 4 years, he was the artistic director of the Verso Artecontemporanea gallery in Turin from 26 to 2017 at the Fondazione Sandretto. In Turin, he taught Methodology of Curating at Campo, a course for curators, and was responsible for the organization and development of exhibition projects in the spaces of the institution in Turin and the Guarene. I probably mispronounced that too.
No, it's perfect.
As well as the exhibitions of the Sandretto collection abroad. He followed as assistant curator for the project Residenza per Giovani Curatori Stranieri, which is the Young Curators Program, from 2009 until becoming the curator for 3 editions from 2015 to 2017. Since 2018, he's taken over the artistic direction of ART CITY Bologna, a series of exhibition events in the city promoted on the occasion of Arte Fiera. Professor of Art Systems at the DAMS of the University of Bologna. He's a member of the board of directors of the Association of Italian Contemporary Art Museums and of the coordination of the Forum of Italian Contemporary Art. And I'm sure there's much more, but I'll end the bio with that and turn things over to Lorenzo. Welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Hope you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I can start. Thank you, Stephen Madoff. Thank you, SVA, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today, even if I don't see you, but I can feel your presence. Thank you for inviting me. Such an honor for me to be part of this precious and beautiful program. Yes, my name is Lorenzo Balbi. I'm 42 now. I'm the artistic director of the MAMbo, the Museum of Modern Art in Bologna, Italy. I started, as Stephen said, reading my bio, I studied art history at the University of Venice, Ca Foscari, and then I specialized in contemporary art at the University of Turin in the northern Italy. In Torino, in Turin, I started working for an important and prestigious private foundation related to contemporary art, which is the Fondazione Sandretto Re Rebaudengo. And there I started my activity as curator. So I started working with especially young Italian artists, and I was involved, as Stephen said, in this program, the residency program for foreign curators. So actually I had an experience in working with young curators coming from different curatorial schools of the world, like Bard College, the CCA San Francisco, the Apple, and others. So I was in charge of this amazing, actually, program, which is still existing. So for students in the audience, take care of this opportunity. The idea was promoting Italian art abroad and inviting 3 young curators coming from the best curatorial schools in the world to come in Italy for some months, like from 4 to 6 months every year, to visit Italy with a curator. So I was honored and lucky to be the curator for this program for many years, to investigate Italian contemporary art scene. So from the northern Italy to the Sicily, trying to find a new generation of Italian artists. So visiting artist studios, galleries, and exhibitions. I was in charge of this program, and thanks to this, I had a good, opportunity to develop a specific knowledge on the new generation of Italian artists, which is really the center of my activity as a curator. Then in 2017, I applied for the position of artistic director at the MAMbo, the Museum of Modern Art in Bologna. And I was selected to be the new director, and I had a first contract with the MAMbo from 2017 to 2021 for 4 years. Then because of pandemic, and we will talk about it in the next few minutes, I had the opportunity to have another year of contract to 22, and then I had another I applied to another open call in 2022, and I'm now at the second mandated second contract with the MAMbo from 2022 to 2026. Today, I was invited to tell you about one specific or 2 specific projects I developed in the recent past, or I really center in my activity as curator. And so now I will tell you mostly about the experience we had about the so-called program Nuovo Forno del Pane, so New Bakery. I'm going to tell you especially about this because for me was a very intense program, and really I had the opportunity, thanks to this program, to reflect about my activity, my interest as a curator, and especially to reflect about the role of public institution in the system of contemporary art on a specific territory or nation. I'm gonna share my screen and show you some pictures, just pictures, I promise, since we are working with visual arts. I'm gonna say just visual content in my intervention. And here, you should see my entire screen. Stephen, can you see it correctly? Perfect. The thing that you see, the building you are looking at, is the MAMbo. So it's a vision, a partial vision of the structure of the museum. MAMbo is one of the oldest public museums related to modern and contemporary art in Italy. It was established in 1975, not in this building, but in another building in another neighborhood of the city. So in May 1st, 2025, we will turn 50 years. So we are in the way of celebrating our 50th anniversary. The museum is an historical museum, an historical institution, well known to be one of the central focus for experimentation in contemporary art, and a museum especially known to be in the way of promoting and working with Italian artists. So the museum is now hosted in this building, which is an historical building. And this is important. I'm telling you the story because it's really reflecting on the aim of the project and program I will telling you during this hour. The building where the museum is housed since 2007 is this building, which is an historical building very well known in Italy and in Bologna, with the name Forno del Pane, which means in Italian bakery. It was built, in fact, thanks to the volunteer of the mayor of the city, Francesco Zanardi, in 1915 and 1916, so more than 100 years ago, as a public bakery. So the idea of the municipality was, during the First World War, to build a building, to build a public bakery in order to cook and sell on an accessible price for people during the war bread. So kind of the symbol of the possibility to survive of this terrible event of war. And they made it. You see in these pictures the two chimneys, two original chimneys on the roof of the bakery, where they cooked and where there were the ovens for cooking the bread. The museum, the building itself had a very different story in the decades from 1915 to today. It was used to be a military storage, then it was bombed during the Second World War. It was abandoned for different times. It was different. It was used for different things. One of the most curious thing it was that for some years in the 70s and 80s, it was the storage for the public coffins. I don't know if you know that if you die and your family cannot afford a funeral, the municipality gives you like a basic set for your funeral, like a wooden coffin and a marble stone. And of course, all those coffins needs a place where to be stored, and this building was the storage of the public coffins. Then it was abandoned it was squat during the 90s by a theater company. They established their venue and they made independent form of theater during the 90s. Their name was Teatrino Clandestino. But then at the end of 90s, the municipality, they decided to move the venue of the museum, so the Galleria d'Arte Moderna di Bologna, established in 1975, in this building, in this very important and known building of the city. It's not far from the city center. It's just one step from the station of Bologna. And of course, I invite you all to come here and visit us. What happened was that at the end of 90s, they needed, of course, to renovate the museum and to the building and to turn it into the museum. So they made an international competition, for architects to develop a specific project, not only to renovate the former bakery in the new venue of the Museum of Modern Art, but also to think about establishing a cultural district, a new cultural district for the city. So the idea, the goal for the architectural competition was not only thinking about a new venue, but also to build a center for culture in the city. So putting together different cultural institutions and thinking about spaces in common and way to create a network and a district for the public. So that happens. The Italian, very famous architect Aldo Rossi won the competition with a project which was named Manifattura delle Arti, which means really cultural district, so manufacturing for the arts. And today, again, I invite you to come here. If you come to our district, you will find, together with the MAMbo, together with the Galleria d'Arte Moderna, also other important cultural institutions of the city, like the Cineteca di Bologna, the Fondazione for the Cinema, and then the art department of the university. I was telling Stephen, the oldest university of the Western world, established in 1088, so more than 900-year-old university. And then other institutions like the oldest LGBTQI plus center in Italy, at the Cassero. The idea is not only a museum, like an island in a neighborhood, but really a network of institutions. Here you have a picture of our entrance and some pictures of our internal spaces. For example, this is one gallery of the permanent collection, because the activity of the museum, of course, is divided in promoting temporary shows in our main exhibition hall and evaluating and working with a collection of more than 5,000 works. The collection was settled and they started collecting, the municipality started collecting in the 40s, and we have now to handle more than 5,000 works, putting together all different medias and also graphics. Now, to give you an idea, we have space in our building to host no more than 200 works. So the permanent collection is not permanent at all. The idea is to work on an impermanent collection, rotating continuously the work and working on temporary sections of the collection in order to display different works from the big amount of works we have to handle with. The focus of the collection is especially Italian art from the 50s to today, but there is a specific section on the permanent collection, which is the only one really permanent, which is an archival section I'm showing you now, related to performance art in the 70s. Because in the 70s, Bologna was the first place, the first city, and the Galleria d'Arte Moderna, so the museum, was the first institution in Italy to develop a specific attention on the medium of performance art. When in the ultra-Catholic Italy, doing performance and body art was just crazy people doing strange stuff in the streets, the museum hosts really an avant-garde event, the Settimana Internazionale della Performance, hosting the major international artists working with performance. And it was a shocking event that completely changed the way of thinking at performance in Italy. To give you an idea, it was the first time, it was 1977, it was the first time when Marina Abramovic, Herman Nietzsche, Gina Pane, they started doing something in Italy properly and to be recognized as really avant-garde artists for the history of art. That was a key moment for the history of the city and of our institution, so we decided to develop an archival section permanently on shown, which is really the heart, the center of the root of our permanent collection. This is a view of our main exhibition hall, which we call Sala delle Ciminiere, which means chimneys hall. You see this strange white column on the back. That is one of our chimneys, so the original chimneys of the bakery. You have to imagine this room as the center of the bakery with ovens and smoke and with this beautiful and good smell of bread 1 century ago. Now it was turned into a white cube by Aldo Rossi, and it's really the center of our exhibition space. Just some pictures of one of the recent shows. This is a solo presentation by Ludovica Carbotta, an Italian artist born in 1982. And this was her first solo presentation in an institution, in a museum. And this is our project space in the upper floor. But I just finished this brief introduction showing you 2 pictures of the original building. So I was telling you that the MAMbo, so the bakery, wasn't the first venue of the museum. The first venue was this one, was this beautiful brutalist modernist architecture made by Leone Pancaldi, Italian architect born in Bologna. During the 70s, the project was made by him in the 70s, and it was opened at May 1st, 1975, and it's still existing now. It's not anymore a museum, it's a congress center, but we really like it, and I want to show you two pictures of this beautiful building. If you're interested in architecture, this is really one of the best example of brutalist architectures in Italy. So I invite you to come here in Bologna to enjoy a visit of the ex-GAM, former GAM. Just one brief note, maybe you know that Giorgio Morandi, the famous Italian painter, was born in Bologna. He spent his entire life in Bologna in a small apartment with the three sisters in Via Fondazza. For sure, Giorgio Morandi is one of the most known Italian artists of the 20th century, and of course, it's one of the masters of Italian art. We host here in the building, together with the MAMbo, the Museo Morandi. So the we have the biggest collection of Morandis, and we host a permanent display on his work to our public. And also we opened in 2007 the house with the studio with all the original objects by Morandi. Then we have a residency program for artists and another museum, but I don't want to tell you because Stephen asked me to tell you about one curatorial project I curated or I was involved in, and I want to tell you in the next half an hour about it. So I'm starting with this picture, and this is a photograph of one big installation we have done in the chimneys room, so the room I showed you before. In 2020. It was February 2020, and we opened a show at the MAMbo, curated by me and another curator, internal curator here, Caterina Molteni, at the museum. And the show was titled Again and Again and Again, and it was a show about the thematic of loop, so the repetition in daily life and the philosophical meaning of loop and living in a loop and dealing with loops in different way. And the main work in this show was this big installation by Ragnar Kjartansson, Icelandic artist, very well known. And this central installation and work was this set with two big houses, totally reconstructed as a theater scenography, reproducing a kind of French village of the countryside in the 50s, with two actors working and playing inside this installation. As you see, one of the two, it was this guy, this bourgeois guy waking up in the morning in this very fancy bourgeois house and playing some piano and having a very cliche French style breakfast, like with croissant and café au lait. And then from through that window you see in the center of this picture, he was looking at the greenhouse over there, where a very beautiful girl was waking up again, doing some daily morning routine. And then they were looking at each other. So the rehearsal, this small theater piece, it lasted for like 3 minutes. They were looking at each other. They found an excuse to meet outside the houses. So she was going down the stairs and she was going out from his apartment. And they met at the fountain, the one you are looking at in the right side of this picture. And they were looking at each other. He was smoking in a very sensual way. She was like changing the water in the flowers, and they were looking at each other. And the guy was saying to her, bonjour. And she was replying him, bonjour. And then they were looking at each other, going back to their apartment. And this scene, every 3 minutes, was going again and again and again, without going to everything more than this. So this was the central part of the exhibition. in 2020 with this Bonjour work. But then what happened, you all remember, in March 2020, Italy was the first nation in Europe to close because of COVID, no? Because of pandemic. And from one day to another, we had to close the exhibition space. We had to close this exhibition. We worked for, I mean, I'm talking with curators, so you know how long does it take to arrive at this kind of exhibitions. And we had to close it. The exhibition was opened just 3 weeks before the closing for pandemic. And then me, as director of the museum, I had to understand the situation and to think what to do in this situation. What we can do now that we have to stay close. Of course, the first reaction we all had was, let's do something online, and we did it. So we started doing from our apartments and from our houses small lessons. We were playing with our name, no? MAMbo. It's not strictly connected to something from Bologna or from Italy. It sounds like more like a South American dance. But we were playing with this name, saying, why don't we do a kind of radio station in our YouTube channel, making these 2 minutes of MAMbo every day. So we were doing short videos with artists involved in the exhibition. I showed you the Ragnar Kjartansson show, or with people involved in some ways to our program. But then, after a while, we understood that the situation, like the pandemic, wasn't something we can close in some minutes or some days. It's gonna last months and months. So we had to react as public institution doing something more. And what happened in that moment was and this is really for me also exciting to remember. In that moment, artists from the local community of artists, they were writing and telling us, what are you doing for us? I mean, we cannot move from our house since we are not officially employee of a factory, of an agency, of a company. We cannot move from our apartment. We cannot go in our studio if we have it. If we don't have a studio, we have not any possibility to work. We ask you as public institution, we ask you as a museum of our city, of our region, to do something for us. There's no way for us to survive if you don't do something for us. So we really thought, together with my staff, that we need to give them an answer. We need to give them to do something for the local community. And what we have done was this project, Nuovo Forno del Pane, which means new bakery. And that's why I was telling you about the story of our building, because we started really from the nature of from the essence, from the history, from the really from the building of the museum. And we decided to completely uninstall the exhibition. So again, I'm talking with curators, so you can really feel the pain for us to uninstall an exhibition we worked on for like 2 years after just 3 weeks of exhibition. But that was the right thing to do. So we said, we cannot wait any longer. We need to give the museum a new nature. We need to think something different. This pandemic is gonna last, and we need to give some answer to the artistic system of the city and of our territory. So we uninstalled completely the show. This is the room where the Ragnar Kjartansson installation was. And we decided to hire 13 artists as staff of the museum. to allow them to move from their houses and to work to establish their studios in our exhibition space. Since the only way for us to remain open to the public was to become a working place, we decided to hire 13 artists. So what we have done was we made an open call. We made an open call for artists, asking basically three things. The first thing was we were asking for artists based in Bologna at that moment, because we were a red zone in the lockdown, so people could not move from a municipality to the other. So we wanted people able to physically come in our spaces, so they had to be based in Bologna. Not Italian, for sure, not from Bologna, but based in Bologna in that moment. Second thing was we were asking for artists without a studio or without a working space in that moment, because we wanted them to give them a possibility to have a space where to develop a specific project or where to have a specific equipment that they couldn't have in that moment in their house, in their apartment. The third thing was to prove a participatory approach in their practice. So the fact that we are not just giving them the possibility to have a residency program or to have a studio program. It was a specific program conceived to be a shared space where artists were asked to work together, and they had to have a clear idea from the very beginning on what they want to bring to the group and what do we want to take from the group. So the balancing between the profiles was there. So we launched this open call, and after like 15 days, we closed it and we received more than 220 applications just from artists from Bologna, which was for us, of course, a big success in terms of numbers, because I mean, probably this program touched really something that was conceived as useful for them. But in the other hand, I always said that in the other hand, this was the proof that we are not doing enough for the artist community. If there are more than 200 artists looking for studios in Bologna, looking for spaces and for possibility to develop a project in Bologna, probably me as a public employee, the museum and the entire municipality needs to understand that we are not doing enough for them. And this is even a lesson that we learned doing this program. The space was divided in 12 different studios. Then, thanks to a collaboration with the Academy of Fine Art in Bologna, we had the possibility to add 13 artists. And here you see some pictures of the studios. As you can see, we had to do this kind of strange Dogville style separation in between the areas because of COVID, but we didn't want any separation in between the studios because the idea was to have a big collective studio group. But then we had to do some separation because of COVID restrictions and rules. So we just put those like yellow lines in between the spaces. But as you can see, it was also a way for us to say that it was crazy and a crazy idea to restrict them to a specific area. As you can see, they had their own spaces, their own studios, but also they had like common spaces and workshop, because in the museum we have different workshops, like wooden workshop, iron workshop, and they were, of course, free to use all our spaces and equipments. What happens? What also that this program really teach the staff of the museum about what they can do in another position. So they were used to just, organize exhibition and making an exhibition in order to be able to make another exhibition, start like planning the travels for the next show, or working on the loans for the new programs. But for the first time, they had really the possibility for 10 months to work strictly with artists, and so to even prove their professionality in another way. Really, this program for the entire institution was completely mind-changing. Was for the entire staff, the way of thinking on how they can think about their work, their daily work in a new direction, in a new position. And the entire project was conceived to be a reflection on the role of public institution, what an institution can really do to support a cultural scene, to support an artistic scene of a specific territory. Then what happened was that the pandemic ended. I mean, not probably. Probably we still are in some pandemic, but thanks to vaccination and everything, we had the possibility to reopen the show, to reopen the museum to public. And so there was, for a period, this coexistence in between visitors, publics, and the presence of the artist, which also was really interesting to investigate. Because previously, when we were closed, the only way for communicating this program was the radio, because we had thanks to this program, we had the possibility to establish a radio inside the museum, which was the official channel for communicating this program, and we still have it. So this is also an heritage. We are still working with this radio because the reflection was how we can communicate to the public what's happening here in the museum. And the answer was, why don't we try to establish a radio? So thanks to some financial support from a private company, we bought the entire equipment to establish a radio in the museum. And so thanks to the Nuovo Forno del Pane, till now, we still have this radio working internally in the museum. At the very beginning was mostly focused on this project, on the presence of the artist, on experimenting even in audio format. But then now it's an official radio with the broadcast, and we have spaces for the activity of the museum, but it's also working as a radio, hosting a music program and other programs. But then, of course, we reopened. And what happened when we reopened? Of course, we had to start again doing an exhibition because we were asked to, and that's also our way of working. So our main exhibition hall, it had to start again to host our international artists or Italian artists. It had to start again its own activity. But we really wanted to keep the Nuovo Forno del Pane. We really wanted to preserve this way of thinking at the museum, not only as an exhibition space, but also as a production space for artists, also as a house for the artists. And so we converted the Nuovo Forno del Pane in Nuovo Forno del Pane Outdoor Edition. What does it mean? We started working with different production places all around the city. And I'm telling you about theater companies, private foundations, independent spaces, artist-run profit spaces. So all different spaces we were connected with. We established a new network of 6 different institutions all around our city to host every year one of the artists of the Nuovo Forno del Pane. So the museum is not anymore the venue of the Nuovo Forno del Pane, but is let's say the antenna putting together every year six or seven different production places in the field of visual arts and theater and independent production, asking them not only to host an artist, but to be in this network to connect the artists we select together to the local community and to their activity. So again, this is again a kind of redefinition of the role of the museum, and even in a more extreme way, not anymore hosting something in our building, but thinking the activity of the museum out of the building. Thinking about the activity of the museum as a possible partner for the entire production system of a territory. And thanks to this, we already had 3 editions, so 18 different production spaces put together with 18 artists and a lot, like hundreds of people involved in this. And from the mountains to the hills, we are sending artists every year in amazing spaces, working with local artists, working with the local communities, working with thinkers and scientists of the places where they are going every year. I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit, but because I wanna show you at the end of this short introduction to the Nuovo Forno del Pane, and so I can drink some water. A short video about this program I really want to share with you. It's in Italian, but with English subtitles, so I'm sorry if you don't... I'm sorry about the volume, but it doesn't matter because you can read. So I'm sharing this, okay.
Il Nuovo Forno del Pane è un centro di produzione interdisciplinare ideato dal MAMbo, il Museo d'Arte Moderna di Bologna. Il progetto nasce da una riflessione sulla funzione e sulle responsabilità del museo e sostiene la produzione artistica durante l'attuale emergenza sanitaria. Il Nuovo Forno del Pane ha sede nella Sala delle Ciminiere del MAMbo e prende il nome dall'edificio in cui è ospitato, un ex forno del pane costruito nel 1915 dal sindaco di Bologna Francesco Zanardi, con la funzione di panificio comunale. Per fare fronte alle difficoltà economiche delle classi più povere durante la Prima Guerra Mondiale, il sindaco avviò una serie di audaci azioni riformiste. Oltre a nutrire la popolazione, decise di promuovere l'istruzione e l'accesso alla cultura per le fasce più deboli. Ispirandosi a questo programma di rigenerazione sociale e culturale, il Nuovo Forno del Pane offre uno spazio a 12 artisti residenti a Bologna, attualmente senza uno studio, sostenendone la produzione e incentivandone la ricerca. Tramite un avviso pubblico sono stati selezionati Ruth Beraha, Paolo Bufalini, Letizia Calori, Giuseppe De Mattia, Ellison Grimaldi Donaiu, Bekbatar Engtur, Eleonora Luccarini, Rachele Maestrello, Francis Hoffman, Mattia Paiet, Vincenzo Simone e Filippo Tappi. Grazie a una collaborazione con l'Accademia di Belle Arti di Bologna e la Fondazione Zucchelli è stata selezionata la studentessa Massi Ellesa, 13ª ospite del progetto. Il Nuovo Forno del Pane ospita anche una stazione radio, gestita da Noi Radio, che ogni settimana trasmette approfondimenti sul progetto e i suoi sviluppi. All'ingresso degli artisti nello spazio sono state simbolicamente riaccese le vecchie ciminiere per avvisare la città della nuova funzione del museo. La comunità creativa composta dai 13 artisti abita quotidianamente lo spazio, dando vita a una sinergia culturale di grande vitalità, anche grazie alle frequenti visite di importanti personalità dell'ambiente culturale. Oltre alle pratiche individuali, gli artisti hanno ideato un programma di incontri pubblici online con intellettuali, poeti e artisti della nostra contemporaneità. In un momento difficile, il museo rimane aperto per gli artisti. L'arte accende il futuro.
Yeah, I'm probably, I have three more minutes, probably, Stephen, just to introduce the thing that I was telling as a second project, because of course, I'm talking with curators and in a curatorial school. Okay, you have done this because of the pandemic. How can you translate this suggestions, this curatorial approach into an exhibition, into a curatorial, like more formal project? And I just wanted to tell you in 2 minutes about a recent exhibition I was asked to curate. It is the Biennale in Belgrade, Serbia. I was invited to curate the biennial in Belgrade last year, 2024. Sorry, can you see it? Yeah. This is the cover of the October Salon, so the oldest biennale in the Balkans. It was the 60th edition, and I was asked to curate this exhibition, the last exhibition in 2024. And I was thinking about institutions as production spaces, dealing with local communities. How can we translate the essence of Nuovo Forno del Pane, the project I told you about, into a biennial, into an exhibition? And so the suggestion, I applied to the call for the curation, and I won the call for the October Salon with a very, very simple project. Why don't we just buy a place with the budget of the Biennale to be a place for artists in Belgrade? That was the only line in my application for the October Salon. I was there for months. This is the Cultural Center of Belgrade we were working with, and with the local, I was in touch with the local community, and they were all asking for spaces. They said, we need spaces for studios, but also we need spaces where to work, where to show our works, because there are no public institution, there are no opportunity in Belgrade for the young artists. So and I was asking what I can do if I win the Biennale, if I win the application for the October Salon, for the Belgrade Biennale, what I can do. And they were saying, we need spaces. So the only thing I wrote in my application was, if I win, I just want to use the entire budget of the Biennale to buy a place. Then we don't have time now to go in deep with this project. We started in this specific location, which is Jugosped, a former Yugoslavian shipping company, abandoned and squatted by a group of more than 50 artists. And we developed an entire project for the Biennale in this space. And now, I know it's a small thing, but it's for me a very important thing. The community in Belgrade, they have a new space where to work, thanks to the Biennale. Thanks, Stephen. I don't want to be late, so no, I took one minute
you're
more.
Perfectly on time. So let's see, there's only one question at this point, and please put your questions in the Q&A below. Renee MG asks, how much is your own research and how much does the hosting museum help? I guess that's a budget question.
I mean, I don't know if it's referred to the Nuovo Forno del Pane, probably, no? So from the project of the residency, I mean, the studio we have done in the MAMbo. So thanks for the question, because it's important and I forgot to tell you about this. You have to think that the entire Nuovo Forno del Pane project was developed during the pandemic. Since we are a public institution 100% related to a municipality, in that specific moment, we had no access to any money, because the budget of a municipality, the budget of a public administration during an emergency period, and that was an emergency period, is completely blocked to face the emergency. So for everybody, it's not possible to access to any public money to do nothing in that moment, because money are blocked. So we had to fundraise for the entire project, but we had really an easy way to access money, because a lot of companies, since we started telling them that we wanted to help the local community of artists, were really helping us. So we reached more than 60,000 euro, not a lot, but it was for us enough to afford the entire organization of the Nuovo Forno del Pane. And of course, we paid the artists. So we, as I told you, we were hiring them. So we guaranteed them a stipend, a monthly stipend, which was not that much, but it was, if I don't remember wrong, it was 700, 800 euro a month. And we didn't ask anything from them. So this is again a strong concept related to the Nuovo Forno del Pane. The Nuovo Forno del Pane was taught as an experience. So there was no exhibition at the end. There was no production asked for the end. They haven't left any works to the museum. It was just the idea of helping him to develop new artworks, to have the possibility to go on in their practice during COVID. So the entire project, it costed kind of 60,000 euros. Sorry.
Okay. There is one other question. Is the space in Belgrade still in production and successfully funded toward the next Biennale? Will you make more applications like the one for the October Salon, as the cry for nowhere to work or show is loud and ringing here in the UK, too, especially in left behind London, for those who didn't vote to leave the EU?
In Belgrade, the situation is still developing. I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to show you the entire project, but I wanted just to throw it in the, you know, on the table, because every time when I speak about the Nuovo Forno del Pane, they tell me, okay, of course, this is something you have done in an institution, easy way, no? But when you are asked to do it like in another place, in another country, in a more formal institutional format, like a biennale, like a show in a white cube, what you can do in that specific ways. And so I just throw this example. I was invited to do a biennale in another place. I never been there before. So I was invited to submit an application. The first thing I have done so far was going there, spending there sometimes, being in touch with the local community, and avoid to be the usual, you know, Biennale curator coming with the friends in the opening of the Biennale with like a spaceship in a place unknown, with some words with no, and like even using the few money they have to really do something, just to have a Biennale with big names and big galleries. I was trying to avoid this and to discuss the Biennale model with a new way of thinking about what an institution, even a cultural biennale, can do for a place. So I was there, and they were saying, they were asking for me and for spaces, and for me it was natural. Say, okay, let's do that. I just submit an application for the 60th edition of the Biennale, asking if we can use their money to buy a place. And so they bought a place, but it's more thanks to the artists invited to be part of not a show, but this, let's say, festival we organize in Belgrade. Even some private entrepreneurs, they gave spaces to the artists to host artist studios in Belgrade. So I hope that it was just, one sparkle that can, start a process of thinking about the use of empty spaces in the city, the use of cultural spaces in the city. And of course, I'm doing more application, and every time I'm thinking about discussing the unwritten roles of institutions. So this is the thing, I think, mostly. Every time when I read an application and I think to apply to something, I always think about how can I do something to rediscuss engagements, rediscuss the role of the institution in that specific context.
Okay, one last question from Christophe. What role is the space in Belgrade now with the student and workers' protest?
Actually, now the space was occupied by the protesters, the students. So, for example, artist studios are hosting students coming from Novi Sad and other places of the Serbia, because as you know, there's this strong protest against the government in Serbia, and of course the artist community, they are really active in the protests. Even in the Biennale a year ago, it was already one of the works, one of the, let's say, I don't know if it's a public program, but we can say that it was a protest in the streets because they were asking for spaces. And the spaces we got are part of, are in the center of hosting students from all over Serbia now.
Okay. Renee has a kind of follow-up, and we'll end with that, asking about, again, the budget in Belgrade. How did artists get paid? How much money did they get? How much the museum helped? How much did the museum help with the content, et cetera, et cetera?
I mean, that's difficult. The Biennale wasn't founded that good. So again, if I don't remember wrong, we had less than 200,000 euros for the entire Biennale. And more than half of it was spent for the space. So for the rest of the program, so we have done different events, and we host artists, local artists and international artists going there, not for showing specific works, but for doing a specific intervention in the line of supporting the idea of using the Biennale for doing mass critique, for doing a way of rethinking cultural spaces. So, for example, we host Lucy and Jorge Horta, and they organize a performance which was a big lunch where they put a lot of tables in the main street in Belgrade, just for pedestrian streets in Belgrade with fancy shops all around. And they put long tables and they organize a lunch And in one side of the table, there was artists from Belgrade. So the one really upset about the lack of spaces, the lack of engagement. And the other side of the table was politicians, journalists, and people involved in the cultural organization in Belgrade. So there was this idea of let's sit and have lunch together, let's talk about it. And in the bread and on the towels, on the table itself, they wrote like questions like what we can discuss about the lack of spaces for artists in Belgrade. So it was the idea of launching something. And also the artists involved in the Biennale, of course, they got a fee from those budgets. And if they produce works, they had a production fee. And yeah, I mean, all coming from that budget or from fundraising.
Okay. All right. With that, thank you so much, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll jump to
Yeah.
the session with the students. And just for the audience to let you know, next week in New York, live in person at the School of Visual Arts, we are hosting Carolyn Christo Bakargiev to give the Global Distinguished Curator Lecture. So that is at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday. So, and it's online as well. You can register on Eventbrite. So with that, Lorenzo, thank you again and see you in a moment. Thanks to the audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Ciao.